Hi, and welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast from ACEC. My name is Thomas Grogan, Senior Director, Economics and Market Intelligence here at ACEC, and I'm also the Staff Director for the Technology Committee. We're really excited today to have Justin Webster, Chief Technology Officer from HDR, on our call today. Justin, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Thomas.
Great. So, I'm just going to dive in with some questions that we have for you, and then also want to learn a bit about your work and your day-to-day at HDR. But one question we've been asking all our guests on the podcast this year to kind of kick things off is, what does digital transformation mean to you?
Yeah, fundamentally to me, it means applying technology in new and exciting ways, whether it be automation, whether it be generative capabilities, or whether it just means digitalizing previously manual processes. It just means leveling up our organizations with modern technologies and capabilities to deliver better products, more value to our clients, in whether those clients are internal or external. It's really about doing better work faster.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you talk about leveling up and kind of, let's say, modernizing. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what your day-to-day role is as the Chief Technology Officer at a firm like HDR, and how you incorporate some of these principles of modernizing, leveling up, digitizing old documents, things like that?
Yeah, really, my job is to help our organization realize our strategic plan, and doing that through the application of technology and our technology strategy to achieve those aims, right? Or those aspirational goals that we have as an organization. And so, from a day-to-day standpoint, it's a mix of kind of envisioning strategic initiatives to the operational execution of our technology projects, as well as just our operations, overseeing our operations, whether it be cybersecurity, technology infrastructure, our design applications, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a soup to nuts, thinking about technology holistically and how it enables our firm.
Yeah, that's a good point, and something we've heard from CTOs, CIOs at other member firms is kind of you start with your business strategy, the business plan, the business model first, kind of have the technology follow, support that. How do you kind of think about connecting the dots between your business strategy or strategic initiatives and having alignment across your technology functions?
Yeah, it's a challenge, obviously, but it's an exciting one at that. I think, really technology is a key enabler. It's a key enabler for organizations of all sorts and industries. And, when I think about it in our particular space, it's really about how do we create the capabilities to augment our people, to deliver our services and realize outcomes that benefit our world. And when we think about it in that kind of macro lens, it's really an exciting, fulfilling proposition. Not that it's any easier. it's certainly a challenge, but it's an exciting one at that. And I've always been fundamentally curious and interested in technology, and so it's really a sweet spot for me, because I'm excited every day to come in and say, how can we do things, leveraging technology capabilities to realize better outcomes that our business is seeking.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned you've had this passion for technology for a while. I know you've worked outside the AEC professional services world. What sort of examples or lessons, or maybe even mistakes, have you seen in other industries from your experience working on technology with respect to financial services, items like that, that you're kind of going to bring into working in the AEC space?
Well, I think that it's common for it probably doesn't even matter industry in many respects. I think that sometimes there's really interesting hype or technologies that come on the scene, emerging capabilities, and one is to leap too quickly to believe that the profound change is here and now, this instant. Typically, it follows that kind of hype cycle that Gartner talks about, right? Where there's this peak of inflated expectations followed by a trough of disillusionment.
Hmm.
And there's a couple things that happen there. One is thinking that something's here for prime time a little too early, and then the second thing is dismissing something when it looks like it's goes into that trough of disillusionment, and really sticking with it and following through being able to dismiss the particular technologies that just aren't going to work, and being able to discern the ones that no, this we should be staying with this and working through those kind of more challenging aspects of those technologies to realize the benefit over time. So, one part is just kind of staying with it and staying disciplined in terms of the emerging technologies. The other thing is like chasing shiny objects that are just too far out there. And one of the things when Gen AI came on the scene with ChatGPT and other models, it was really interesting. But it seemed like a lot of different players wanted to go create foundation models, and that's not for the faint of heart. Organizations like Google and Microsoft, OpenAI, and others are spending billions of dollars doing those things. Those are not activities that we should be doing as an AEC firm. What we should be doing is leveraging those capabilities with our own capabilities to achieve goals and objectives and outcomes in the AEC industry, right? So those are the problems we should be solving. And it's really about focusing on the right problems and solving the right problems practically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, what do you have any maybe examples of some technologies that maybe have been through this trough of disillusionment recently that you kind of are hopeful that 5, 10 years from now, will still be around, or, will, let's say, morph or leverage into something a bit more productive, or basically, we shouldn't be dismissing right away?
Oh, there's quite a few, right?
Yeah.
You could get me talking all day on this particular topic. Some, I'll take some are virtual reality,
Okay.
right? That's a capability that has visualization in general, is really exciting, but it's just taking time to work through that in a meaningful way to have like the maximum impact. I'm not dismissing the technology as something that isn't useful. It's just nobody really wants to wear a heavy headset on their covering their eyes for
Mhm.
lengthy periods of time. So I think around the miniaturization and making the form factor fit, comfortably in ways that are I guess not against human nature. Again, covering our eyes and not knowing what's immediately around us is not natural as human beings.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things have to get worked through, and I think we're going to have to. They will continue to be worked through, and we see lots of progress, but it's kind of a long journey to get there. And I think that's one that's key is to keep in mind, and kind of what you're talking about. Blockchain is another one that I've been following, even from financial
Mhm.
services. It's a really interesting and capable technology, but in many, many instances, it was a technology looking for a use case outside of the kind of the cryptocurrency realm. Not that there isn't applicable use cases out there, but there maybe not as many as people originally thought. And various forms of AI is also kind of playing out now as well, including generative AI. I think that the capability of kind of that general purpose or AGI is still coming about, still
Mhm.
evolving, still maturing.
Mhm.
It's not maybe as far along as some would lend you to believe, and so we're looking at where can we incorporate those technologies effectively today in the here and now that in a really responsible manner.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And the VR example is something that, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago was a bit of hype, or maybe more the use case was really for like gaming, right? Those people
Right.
might be okay wearing a full-on headset, but I actually read just the other day an interesting stat from IDC that was that this year, the number of the new Meta Facebook Ray-Ban augmented glasses that they made is going to sell like 10x more than the Apple Vision Pro, which is more that kind of full wraparound headset as opposed to kind of more cool looking Ray-Bans. And, I guess that really does kind of speak to your point of, really aligning the technology with what the users are going to care about or be comfortable with and, make it practical. So, with respect to, say, technology and technology strategy, which takes input from a business strategy, what are these other components of the technology strategy that someone working at a firm should think about with respect to either business models, data, all your IT information systems? How do you kind of think about a technology strategy, or what a technology strategy 101 would be for someone who's, stepping into a first time CTO or head of innovation role?
Yeah. Happy to talk through that. I mean, there's a lot of layers to
Right.
that particular question, and I think we could. It's another one that we could dive really deep into and spend some really lengthy time talking about to do it justice. But
Mhm.
obviously there's kind of that outcome aspect of it, like what are we trying to achieve, and then technology strategy is that critical enabler, like how do we put those technology components in that align to achieving those outcomes and those objectives. And when I start thinking about those kinds of things, I start thinking about, well, what are the technologies that are those critical enablers to allow us to achieve those outcomes that we seek. And there's the technology component of it that is obvious, but then there's also, I think, a lot about our people and our skills. Like, how do we enable our people to leverage technologies or even be able to operate and implement these kinds of technologies that would get us to those particular objectives that we seek? Well, how are the people that we have, how are we going to skill them in meaningful ways for the future in order to enable those outcomes? So there's this huge people and skills aspect of it. There's also the software and hardware, the technology capabilities, but then there's the manifest forms of that, like the cloud capabilities, and where does that play into it? And what's the best way to achieve a particular outcome or technology strategy that we're moving toward? And data is this critical foundation, right? I think of it along the lines of people, process, technology, and data. I think those are aspects that I think are core tenets to the things that I think about on a daily basis. And in every case of those, it's like, how do we enable each of those key pillars, if you will, to achieve those outcomes that we're seeking? And data gets it. I'll just spend a little bit of time on that one, because I think people that have been around technology for decades have talked about process technology, but data is that the recognition that as a key enabler and differentiator for organizations. But many organizations have it, but is it in a usable form? Is it of quality? Are we monitoring for bias and detecting for bias? And what are those kinds of safeguards and frameworks that we put in place to really leverage those capabilities to their maximum extent? And it's not for the faint of heart. Like, I think a lot of organizations set out with really good intent, and find that it's really difficult, and that's because it is. But it's still worth doing. And I think the organizations that really get good, synthesize kind of really how they're approaching those particular things, such as data and data quality, are going to be very successful. They're going to realize the most success.
Yeah. Well, to I love talking about data as well. To quickly, deep dive a little bit into that, how do you deal with, let's say, breaking down data silos, or kind of these things where maybe your HR or project management billing data might be living in one system, and then some of your more customer facing market forecast data is living somewhere else? And how do you work cross-functionally to kind of bring it all together and make sure there's quality around how you can glean insights from those different data sources?
Yeah, I mean, that's a profound challenge across all organizations,
Hmm.
and appreciate the question because it's absolutely a real, a real one that I've seen throughout my career.
Hmm.
I think the first part of it is just recognizing where data exists, right, and start creating, a proper catalog of what is the data that we possess, what is the data of record, what are the systems of record in terms of our gold copy or of data, and then getting common definitions around that so that it can be well understood, and then well understood who are the owners of that data and who are the stewards of that data, and instituting a governance framework around that. And that doesn't mean a heavy-handed, it sounds heavy just saying it.
Hmm.
In some instances, it does need to be a little more disciplined than others, depending on the sensitivity and criticality of the data. And I think it's really about putting the structures, processes, and foundations in place to enable the organization in a meaningful way. That takes effort. And it's a particularly difficult time. It's kind of that, you know, Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, if you've ever read that book.
Hmm.
It's fantastic. And it feels like that's kind of a situation that we're experiencing in AEC industry right now, is because we have a tremendous amount of work. And so the organizations are trying to deliver on that work, but we're also trying to, position ourselves for the future at the same time.
Hmm.
It's that constant tension of making sure that we get the work done so that we can meet the expectations and delight our clients, but then also prepare ourselves for the future, and creating data foundations in which we can create more value and better outcomes for our clients over time. So and that's part of the technology strategy. To go back to your earlier question, is really thinking about what is that kind of strategic roadmap that we're trying to get at, and what are those waypoints along the way that get us towards that aspirational vision that we have. In many instances, the technologies that we choose, we have to think about what is the value in the near term and what is the value in the long term. And it's not just simple. It's not a simple equation of saying, hey, I'm just going to choose the long term value, because I've seen it in my career a number of times, even in financial services and other places, that if the tangible value to the organization is too far out, like the thing just kind of falls apart and implodes under its own weight, because the organization's like, hey, I've been waiting for value and I haven't seen any.
Hmm.
I'm going to go do something that we're going to go put our investments where we can get something that helps sooner and later. So I think that's really part of the critical thinking that goes into that strategic technology plan, is how to deliver value, but then that in the near term, but how does that then leapfrog you or springboard you into the long-term value that you're shooting for?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I definitely am going to ask a bit more about the strategic roadmap, but I wanted to circle back to one other item that you talked about, when thinking about a technology strategy and you bring up the skill sets or need for new skills or training
Yeah.
of employees. How do you work, or would someone work cross functionally? Is it like being aligned with like a chief people officer or like to get that sort of, frankly, training or identifying training, and working so that folks don't feel like they're just being told they have to learn this new system for the sake of learning the new system, but really, right? Like, how many times has a new software been told, start keeping all your notes in this system or that, and it just dies on the vine? You really want to get that buy-in. How does that kind of work, behind the scenes?
Yeah, at HDR, there we do have a chief talent development
Okay.
officer, and so it's working very collaboratively
Hmm.
with that person and that organization, as well as cross-functionally across the organization. 'Cause simply doing it in a silo to your point of your question, like if you just kind of demand something from on high, you get people, you don't get the level of engagement that you're seeking. And
Hmm.
so there has to be value in it for all involved, and it really has to be a collaborative process throughout the organization. One that's top of mind that I think of a lot right now is data. Back to data is really kind of that data scientist, data fluency, data analytics kind of understanding and abilities. Like
Hmm.
we're not going to be able to just go hire hundreds and hundreds of data scientists. Like it's that's not feasible. It's not
Hmm.
practical. What we do need to do is infuse data science skill sets throughout our organization. And so that's something that we think about is just one example
Hmm.
that we're creating courses and knowledge articles and really assets for our people to leverage in order to one, I think many of the folks in our organization are hungry to go try and leverage these sort of techniques and technologies in interesting ways, and we want to be able to help them do that. And so it's really about that kind of symbiotic flywheel
Hmm.
type of relationship about you know offering the capabilities that people want that are also in alignment with the organization's needs and desires.
Yeah, and I will say, having played around with some of the LLMs, GPTs, those, depending on what you're working with, they're almost like a data science assistant in the box, and can definitely see how leveraging, you know, a skilled worker with the assistance of technology can produce 5x, 10x, or new work that they couldn't have done before. So, thinking about the ACEC membership, we have wonderful firms like HDR who have many thousands of employees, and then we have some pretty small firms. Some might just be sole proprietorships, 2 to 5 people. If you're one of these smaller firms, how should you think about a technology strategy, going back to your talk about having a strategic roadmap? Does every firm need a technology strategy? What kind of are maybe some basics or ways to start so that you don't get ahead of yourself or waste your time, resources, buying products you don't need, spending time trying to do something that isn't in your wheelhouse and skill set? What kind of advice would you have for, a firm that really just doesn't have all the resources available to it?
Yeah, I think it's important to just characterize. A technology strategy sounds heavy,
Right.
right? Just by saying it, and it needs to be fit for purpose for the organization. I think you know it depends on the situation, but every organization should have what I would say is a North Star, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that North Star is a guiding light to say, hey, we have aspirations of something from a business perspective. Technology is a key enabler to achieve those objectives. So there needs to be some thought about how to leverage technology in a meaningful way to get the organization from where it is to where you want it to be, right? That's and so from a technology strategy perspective, it can simply be that, like how are we going to leverage technology in order to achieve our strategic aims as an organization and over what time horizon. And so the more near term needs to have a bit more detail. Then the things that are further out obviously are a little bit fuzzier because our business context and environment will change over time, and we have to be able to be adaptable over that time. So it's never a set it and forget it kind of thing. We're constantly thinking about it over time. What do we need to adjust? What needs to be adapted? As things happen, and that's okay. And so as I think about smaller firms and just firms of different sizes and different sets of business services and whatnot, like you just need to think about technology as a key enabler and how that allows or will provide a means for the organization to achieve its aspirations, and how does that align over time, and then we start thinking about not just if you can't just simply say, well, we want to do X. There has to be that next level thought of how do we enable. Is it, if it's a smaller firm, it may be yourself, you may think, oh, how am I going to acquire the skill sets that I need in order to be able to leverage a particular technology that opens some doors for us as an organization.
Great. Well, Justin, I really appreciate you being here and joining us today. I'm going to ask one question, one final question. It's a little two-parted to get the most bang for my buck. But what do you think is, say, a top risk that firms would face going on a digital transformation journey? And then what's a top opportunity, to end on a positive note?
Yeah, well, I mean, the risk, from a risk perspective, a top risk is wasted investment. I think that's a very real possibility. There's a lot of different dead end roads to go down. I think is a possibility, and also there can also be cybersecurity vulnerability and risk, as opposed to by implementing new technologies and perhaps leaving a door unguarded, so to speak, just to use an analogy. And so, yeah, there are some risks out there for certain. But I also think that it is, again, back to my what I've said a number of times, is technology is a key enabler, and I think it's not something that can be ignored. I think not only from an efficiency standpoint, but also from a capability standpoint. So, some of the things that I think about in terms of the application of new technologies is we also have to have a balance of thinking about things that are efficiency plays versus things that are new capability plays, meaning things that enable us to deliver better, maybe better services or better deliverables to our clients. You can't focus on just one. It's easy to kind of think about efficiency right now because there's so much work to be done. But if we solely focus on efficiency, we're effectively kind of just commoditizing the work that we do. Instead of, we need to become more efficient, but we also have to create more valuable deliverables and outcomes for our clients at the same time. So we have to think about it in both respects, and I think that's really important. And companies that don't think about technology are in position to be disrupted. Those that are thinking about leveraging technologies in creative ways, and it doesn't just have to be the most expensive technologies, but leveraging technologies in creative ways, are those poised to be disruptors and reap the benefits.
Great. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening. Please stay tuned, as we'll have more interviews with experts like Justin and other member firms talking about digital transformation throughout the year. So thanks.
Thank you.